Hello, biologists. So, you already know what roots and shoots are. So, we'll talk about what they're doing. You probably can already start to kind of figure out for yourself what roots are doing, what leaves are doing, and what stems are doing. Roots are going to have the functions of anchoring the plant. So, they keep that plant settled in place. They absorb minerals and water. And they often also will be storing carbohydrates. So as the leaves are performing photosynthesis, those sugars that the leaves create can be sent back down to the roots and stored there. Roots start creating the primary root in the seed embryo. So that is the first thing that emerges from the seed. And then from that primary root, lateral roots will branch off. And those lateral roots help improve the anchorage in the soil and help improve water absorption. When plants are very tall, they're generally going to have a structure called a taproot. And a taproot is going to be this large root that comes down. Taproots usually develop from the primary root. They're not going to be very good at absorbing nutrients, so they're energetically costly, but they allow the plant to anchor itself better, which allows it to grow taller. And in return, those taller plants have more access to sunlight, so they can perform more photosynthesis. And they also have advantages for their flowers to disperse their pollen and their seed. So although it costs so much energy to create a taproot, it's often overall advantageous for that access to sunlight and for reproductive dispersal. Some plants don't have lateral roots. Some plants have a fibrous root system, and it's just going to spread out like just a mat of roots below the surface. Primary roots can die without forming a taproot, and in that event, adventitious roots occur. So here, this image shows a taproot growing down and roots coming out from the taproot. These are adventitious roots that instead of having a taproot coming down and the roots coming out, these adventitious roots come right off from the stem. Fiber systems are also helpful to prevent soil erosion because they hold that soil in place. So now you can compare lateral roots and taproots. Take a moment and write down your answer, please. Roots are very important in absorbing water and minerals, and they typically do that through root hairs. So root hairs are these little fingery, hairy projections, and they increase the surface area of the root, which means it's able to absorb more water. It has more contact with the environment. Root hairs often can also create mycorrhizal associations, what we discussed a couple of chapters ago. Mycorrhizal associations are interactions between the plant and fungi, and that also helps the plants be able to absorb more mineral. Here's a radish seed, and we'll see this grow a little bit of a root. Here's its root hairs. You can see its taproot coming down. Some roots have adaptations of roots. One would be a prop root. Prop roots are found in bamboo and corn. They help support tall plants. Storage roots, like what is in sugar beets, store excess nutrients. So they're called sugar beets because they're storing all that sugar. Pneumatophores are found in aquatic trees, and they allow these trees to access the air. Aerial roots are found in the air. They grow in crevices of another tree, and these aerial roots will strangle the underlying host tree. And buttress roots will provide support in moist in shallow tropical soils. So describe the adaptations in root structure and function. We just discussed several. See how many you can remember just from listening and seeing the image. And then you can go back and write down your answers. If you need to go back and refer to the image, you can. Okay, next we have the shoot system. So let's start with the stem. The stem is the organ that is going to bear leaves and buds. One of the big things that it does is it brings the leaves up to where they can access sunlight for photosynthesis. And sometimes the stem can do photosynthesis, but mainly that occurs in the leaves. The stem also helps bring up the flowers to make it easier for pollen and fruit to be dispersed. The stem alternates between nodes and internodes. Nodes are the places where leaves attach, and internodes are the spaces between them. So here's a node, internode, node, internode, node, internode, node. The pical bud, or actually the apical bud, is the tip of the stem where most of the growth is going to occur. There are also axillary buds. Some adaptations of stems. Sometimes these can be confused for a root, but these are not roots. These are stem tissue. There are rhizomes. Rhizomes are underground stems that grow just below the surface. Stolons are used as asexual reproduction in many plants. These stems coming this way from the strawberry plant. Sometimes they're called runners, and new plants can come off at the nodes. And then tubers are enlarged ends of rhizomes that are used in storage. So they'll store sugar. Okay, what is the difference between a node and an internode? Then leaves. Leaves are the main photosynthetic organ. So to do that, they need to be able to absorb sunlight. So they are usually positioned where they can absorb sunlight. They also need to exchange gases with the atmosphere. So they have to bring in carbon dioxide to perform photosynthesis. Then oxygen is a waste product of photosynthesis, so that has to be sent back out. They tend to vary extensively in form. A lot of that is in part of natural selection and this constant battle between different traits that a leaf needs to have to avoid being eaten by an herbivore, or also to allow the best photosynthesis, to allow the best exchange of gases. There's two main parts of them: a flattened blade, which maximizes leaf absorption, and the petiole, which is the stalk that holds the leaf on the stem. Here this has multiple blades, and this is the petiole. Monocots and eudicots will differ in their arrangements of their veins. Monocots have parallel veins, and most eudicots have branching veins. And then leaf shape can be simple, where there's one undivided blade on a petiole, or compound, where you have a blade with many smaller leaflets. There are different adaptations of leaves. One example would be a tendril. Tendrils can wrap and twist around other structures, allowing plants to cling to things and to climb. Spines are leaves that are mainly used for protection. Bulbs are used to store food in modified leaves. Typically, you'll find bulbs growing from an underground stem. And then reproductive leaves, which can fall off and produce new plants. So how does leaf structure differ in monocots and in eudicots? That's going to be the end of our little discussion of roots and shoots. Please come back for our next video where we'll discuss dermal, vascular, and ground tissues. See you later. Bye.